Labour's vowed to crack down on tax avoiders to help pay for free breakfast clubs and additional NHS appointments.
Well, the party's spending plans were thrown into question when Jeremy Hunt seemed to pinch two of their top revenue-raising policies in the budget. But Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the new clampdown would help raise £5 billion a year, and she joins us now. Is it frustrating that Jeremy Hunt took those policies? Because it's meant you've had to scratch your head and think, how can we raise this cash? And are you confident you can do it this way?
Well, they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So the fact that Jeremy Hunt took some of Labour's policies in his budget last month, I think just shows that the Conservatives have run out of ideas and now they've taken to pickpocketing Labour ones. But I said at the time that I would go through all the government's documents and make sure that Labour's commitments to reduce NHS waiting lists, breakfast clubs in primary schools, emergency dental appointments, that those policies still stood. But I would make sure they were fully costed and fully funded. And that's what people can expect from me as Shadow Chancellor and I hope as Chancellor of the Exchequer if Labour is successful in the elections later this year. So I've now done that piece of work and through a combination on cracking down on tax avoidance that the National Audit Office says could bring in an additional £6 billion a year, and also strengthening the rules that the government are bringing in around non-DOMs, because even though they say they've taken Labour's policy, there are still a number of loopholes in what they're bringing in, that we can bring in more than the money that is necessary to continue to honour those important commitments around the NHS and schools.
In your announcement today, you refer to the tax gap, which is what the Inland Revenue, the HMRC, says is the money that they should collect, but they aren't collecting. And that tax gap is now at the lowest level it's been for 20 years. It's come right down to less than 5%. You're saying today you're going to spend £500 million and employ 500 more tax inspectors, and that is going to get it to an even lower level, bring in £5 billion a year. How will that actually be done?
So you'll remember, Ed, under the last Labour government, we started measuring that tax gap. And it reduced under those years of Labour government. It also reduced in the coalition years under a Conservative-led government. But this government, Rishi Sunak and his team, have taken their eye off the ball. And actually, last year, the tax gap increased by £5 billion. The National Audit Office, the head of the National Audit Office, gave a speech earlier this year that said through properly resourcing HMRC, we could look to bring in an additional £6 billion worth of revenue. And also in the report that I've published today, we've highlighted that the number of cases investigated by HMRC has fallen by something like 20% during the course of this Parliament. And so the deterrent effect just isn't working. We're confident that we could bring in that additional money, as well as the money we can bring in through strengthening rules around non-DOMs.
It will mean if there's 500 more tax inspectors, each one of them, on average, is going to have to bring in an extra £10 million.
I think actually the announcement today is for more than 500 additional tax inspectors. But we have taken advice from different tax and legal experts. If you look as well at what is happening in the United States, where their IRS, the equivalent of our HMRC, has really strengthened their tax collection service, bringing in additional money. But we haven't been doing that in the last few years in Britain. And as a result, the tax gap in just the last year has gone up by £5 billion. That's £5 billion that should be going into our frontline public services, but can't if it's not actually collected.
Who would you be aiming this at? Because for a lot of people, their experience of dealing with HMRC is one of frustration, not being able to get through, finding it hard to get advice, not wanting to make mistakes, but also perhaps not having access to some of the legal advice other people have. Will you be offering that as a service? Is it all about catching people out? Because that's what some might fear.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Kate, that tax compliance as well as tax avoidance is what today's announcement is about. At the moment, if you try and phone up HMRC, you're often in a queue for not just minutes, but hours, and the tax system is complicated. And sometimes a simple phone call, and that phone call being answered, can mean that you get your tax return right first time. So the recruitment of additional people to work at HMRC is also about making sure that people get their tax returns right. So it's about tax compliance as well as tax avoidance. But on tax avoidance specifically, at the moment, cases are just not being pursued because the staff are not there to do it. And if the deterrent effect is not there, not only are you not catching people that are trying to fiddle the system, but also you're not deterring people because there's a feeling that actually, I'm never going to be caught if I do fiddle my tax returns. So this is about making sure that people have the advice to pay the right amount of tax, but also that we are cracking down on those who are avoiding paying their share and therefore shifting the burden of funding our NHS and our schools to the vast majority of people who are paying their fair share of tax. This is about making sure everyone pays their fair share so we can properly fund our schools and our health service.
OK, how awkward is it for you delivering this strong message, as you are this morning, when Angela Rayner is still in the midst of accusations, questions, allegations about whether her tax has been paid appropriately and correctly?
Well, I think Angela was on your programme less than 2 weeks ago and answered some quite detailed questions about her own tax affairs.
She did,
going back
but it
10
didn't stop the questions still being asked. It's not going away, is it? That's the challenge.
Well, I mean, this is around the sale of her house when she was married to her ex-husband almost 10 years ago before she was a Member of Parliament. She's answered questions about it. She has sought legal advice to make sure that she did pay the proper amount of tax that was due. She's confident about that. I have the utmost faith in my friend and colleague, Angela Rayner, and I'm confident as well that she's paid her fair share of tax.
Keir Starmer said that he hadn't seen her detailed tax records or advice, but his staff had, and they were satisfied she'd done nothing wrong. Have you seen the details or have your staff seen it?
No, I haven't asked to see the details, and I haven't asked to see the tax returns or the tax advice, legal advice of any of my colleagues. This has got to be on a basis of trust. I'm confident that she's sought that advice and has taken that advice, and that advice is that she doesn't have a tax bill due. And I think that's the right way that it should be. You've got to be able to trust your colleagues, know that they've done the right thing and sought the advice to make sure that they've done the right thing. Angela's answered questions about this, but today's announcement is making sure that the tax code is fully complied with, that tax avoidance is cracked down on, and that by doing that, we can resource our schools and our hospitals in a way that they need to be resourced if we're going to get down those NHS waiting lists.
The thing is, though, that Keir Starmer said his staff did see Angela Rayner's detailed tax affairs and what had happened with this particular payment. And I just wondered, if they were shown them and they were satisfied, why not make something public and then end all this speculation?
Because, the tax affairs of other MPs and government ministers are not published. And I don't think it should be one rule for Angela and another rule for everybody else. This is about the sale of her home before she was a Member of Parliament, when she was married to her ex-husband. This goes back years now. She has taken that advice, and it was right that she did that. But I'm satisfied that she's got all of the information and the advice that is needed and has paid the tax that is due. But today's announcement is making sure that those with the broadest shoulders, including people who make Britain their home but aren't paying their taxes here, are properly contributing to frontline public services here in the UK, where they make their home, because it is right that everybody that lives here helps pay for our vital public services.
And if the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, sees your announcement today, decides I'll have that, snaffles it, does a budgeting or a spending review in September, and then announces another national insurance cut with the money you want to spend on the NHS, what do you do then?
Well, look, that's up to Jeremy Hunt, what he puts in his budget. If he wants to crack down on tax avoidance, I will back him 100% in that, because it is right that people pay their fair share of tax. But, you know, if the government and the Tories steal another one of Labour's policies, I think it just goes to show once and for all that they've run out of ideas, they've run out of road. It's time for an election and time for a government that actually has the ideas and is determined to put them into action.
Well, good to speak to you this morning, Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, and I'm sure we'll speak again and come back to you as this thing unfolds. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.